Is it possible for a Disney princess to spark more controversy than enchantment? That's precisely what happened with the live-action Snow White, led by a young actress named Rachel Zegler. While the original 1937 cartoon redefined animation and introduced the world to Disney's dreamy, hopeful style, this modern adaptation tore open a rift between fans craving old-school magic and those demanding an updated worldview. By the end of its theatrical run, the project stood as one of Disney's costliest disappointments, weighed down by negative headlines and an actress who seemed to attract as much criticism as she did praise. Audiences wanted a revival of that classic fairy tale glow. What they got, according to critics, was a heavy-handed sermon on modern womanhood that dismissed the story's romantic spirit. And in the middle of it all was Rachel Zegler, whose outspoken interviews, social media slips, and jabs at the older film set the internet ablaze. How did a bright new star and a beloved property collide in a storm of controversy? Let's unravel the events that turned a simple remake into a cautionary tale for Hollywood's future. Long before the trailer debuted, Disney fans had scoured rumors about which actress would inherit Snow White's iconic red bow. Rachel Zegler, coming off a heralded performance elsewhere, won the role. At first, many cheered the idea of a new Snow White who reflected the changing times. Still, whispers emerged that Disney might overhaul the gentle charm of the original in favor of louder, more overt messaging. The 1937 Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was a delicate tale of innocence, highlighting a young princess who finds friendship with woodland creatures and dwarfs, then dreams of a happily ever after with her prince. In modern times, some critics deemed the plot outdated, eager to see a feistier, more independent heroine. Still, fans of the classic worried, would Disney lose the sweet essence that made Snow White timeless? Within days of the casting announcement, Rachel Zegler gave interviews about how her Snow White wouldn't be saved by a prince, and wouldn't just dream of true love. She teased a bolder interpretation. Many applauded this shift, calling it an empowering update. Others fretted Disney was throwing away the original magic simply to appear progressive. Online discussions turned into heated arguments. Was it right to fundamentally alter a story cherished by generations, or was such change long overdue? Around the same time, industry sources leaked that Disney had poured a massive budget into set designs, CGI, and potential reshoots. The studio seemed determined to make this a surefire success, at least on paper. Yet from the get-go, the script's direction and Zegler's commentary sparked controversy among nostalgia-driven fans. That tension would only escalate once talk of the film's woke angle spilled into the mainstream, setting the stage for what would become a cultural battleground. The earliest sign of trouble arrived when Rachel Zegler criticized the original film as weird, and hammered home the idea that Snow White's prince was basically a stalker. She gave interviews suggesting it was time to fix the old narrative. Her argument? The 1937 story lacked depth, and having Snow White wait around for a prince didn't reflect what modern women wanted. She needs to do more than just stand there singing about love, Zegler insisted in one viral soundbite. On paper, these remarks sounded like standard Hollywood updates. Plenty of remakes have been reframed for contemporary sensibilities. However, the tone triggered frustration. Many longtime Disney fans felt the actress was insulting what they had always loved. Why not depict Snow White as an active hero while still honoring the original's heart? Accusations flew that Disney was more interested in lecturing than telling a great story. Bloggers, YouTubers, and film pundits dissected every Zegler quote. One highlight of the 1937 film was its innocent romance. Was it really creepy to glimpse a charming stranger who eventually rescues Snow White? To some, that line of thinking took a whimsical fairy tale moment and painted it as predatory. The constant references to fixing the source material also implied the original was broken at its core. But the actress didn't back down. She regularly doubled down on talk shows and social media, defending her stance that the old version was outdated. In doing so, she seemed to dismiss those who yearned for the nostalgic simplicity of Disney's first princess. This woke versus classic debate escalated rapidly, as critics of the film labeled it nothing more than a soapbox for modern ideas, while defenders claimed it was about time Disney avoided romantic cliches. Before the film had even locked its final edit, the script's potential flaws were overshadowed by an internet swirl of fervent commentary. The controversy reached new heights when Rachel Zegler posted, and soon viralized, a TikTok featuring her and friends entering an almost empty theater. She carried branded Snow White cups and popcorn buckets, rolling her eyes at the cashier's question, "For which movie, please?" The skit was meant to be playful, but it struck many viewers as arrogant. "How could anyone not know it's me?" the actress seemed to imply. This harmless gag turned toxic on social media. Memes compared Zegler's smug look to the meltdown of a star who assumed she was universally recognized. Commenters argued the clip displayed how disconnected she was from average viewers who might not be following every step of her career. Soon, Snow White flop trended on X, once known as Twitter, and reaction videos picking apart the actress's facial expressions racked up views. Complicating matters further, Rachel had been vocal about her political beliefs online, sometimes ridiculing entire blocks of people who opposed her ideals. While activism isn't new in Hollywood, her broad strokes lumped together large sections of potential Disney viewers, painting them as backward or unenlightened. Those who disagreed found her tone condescending. Even some who might have aligned with her politics felt she was being too dismissive of basic audience goodwill. Disney, hoping the hype of a modern Snow White would overshadow any drama, reportedly tried to pivot. Rumor has it that marketing teams toned down her presence in promotional materials, focusing on spectacle rather than star interviews. But social media immortalized every misstep. Clips of her calling the original prince a weirdo circulated alongside that empty theater skit, forming a narrative that the film had alienated a core audience well before release day. When Snow White finally opened, the early box office returns were dismal, even worse than many analysts had predicted. Despite a budget well over $250 million, plus a marketing blitz, the movie limped to around $43 million domestically in its opening weekend. For a Disney tentpole, those numbers spelled trouble. Critics dubbed it a historic flop, and fans hopped on social media to joke that not even a magic kiss could revive this film. Various theories circulated. Some pinned the failure on an overzealous push for modern themes. Others pointed to negative word-of-mouth sparked by Zegler's interviews and social media snafus. A handful of insiders suggested that the rewrite stripped away the fairy tale enchantment audiences craved. Some saw the bloated budget itself as a sign of internal chaos, believing the studio had no clear vision beyond "look how big we can go." Regardless of which angle they took, reviewers piled on harsh critiques. Major outlets complained that the new Snow White lacked charm and that the film felt more like a lecture than a whimsical journey. Meanwhile, family-focused forums erupted with stories of parents choosing to skip the movie altogether, put off by the star's combative tone. Even fans who disliked princess culture recognized the financial fiasco. A project that cost a fortune might not even break even. International markets offered no relief. While some Disney remakes rely on overseas audiences to bolster domestic shortfalls, Snow White underperformed around the globe. The final tallies painted a bleak picture, a film that might lose hundreds of millions when the dust settled. Whispers suggested it could rank among Disney's most expensive failures. In an industry where blockbusters keep studios afloat, the meltdown rocked the empire's sense of invincibility. A massive flop inevitably triggers backstage drama. Insiders claimed Disney executives held emergency meetings after seeing the disappointing weekend totals. While no single factor could account for everything that went wrong, Rachel's outspoken presence rose to the top of many suspect lists. The studio had banked on her star power and boldness to connect with younger demographics, only to watch it backfire among more traditional Disney fans. Co-star Gal Gadot, who portrayed the evil queen, didn't escape speculation. Tabloids questioned her wooden acting, though defenders noted the film's script gave her little to work with. Rumors abounded of an on-set rift between her and Zegler, allegedly exacerbated by personal or political differences. No official source confirmed these stories, but they added juicy gossip to an already spiraling production. Then there was the dwarf controversy. Actor Peter Dinklage had publicly criticized Disney for revisiting what he called archaic depictions of dwarfs, pressing the studio to be more mindful. Meanwhile, some performers with dwarfism lamented that they lost roles due to the film's pivot to CGI or average-height actors. Disney's attempt to dodge one problem, appearing insensitive, led to another, accusations of overcorrection that robbed the film of its trademark Seven Dwarfs. When the dust settled, rumors spread that Disney was re-evaluating its future live-action lineup. Executives worried they'd run out of audience goodwill by meddling too heavily with classics. A broader identity crisis loomed. Could the company keep reimagining old properties if fans now associated these projects with controversy and subpar box office returns? By the time the meltdown became undeniable, the conversation had shifted from a single film's shortcomings to a cultural flashpoint. Rachel Zegler's political and social opinions made her a target for conservative commentators, who gleefully held up Snow White as an example of woke entertainment destroying itself. Figures like Danica Patrick even took public shots, reposting scathing commentaries alongside mocking captions. Meanwhile, Sean Ono Lennon called Zegler a disconnected brat, citing her arrogance and insensitivity to audiences who didn't share her worldview. Social media frothed with debates, as supporters argued that she was simply standing up for her beliefs. Opponents insisted that by painting large groups of people with a negative brush, she alienated a sizable chunk of potential moviegoers. Moreover, the fiasco fueled a broader Hollywood discussion about woke fatigue. Some industry pros voiced concern that constant emphasis on moral or political messaging might overshadow storytelling, pushing mainstream audiences away. Others argued that forward-thinking values are crucial in modern film, but must be woven more subtly into the narrative. In the end, Snow White emerged as a new punchline, a fairy tale reboot that hammered its points so loudly, it forgot to entertain. Amid this cultural maelstrom, Rachel Zegler occasionally posted defiant responses. She retweeted supportive fans labeling critics as bigots or nostalgia addicts. This fueled further backlash. If she hoped to salvage the film's reputation, it might have been wiser to defuse tensions. Instead, her combative tone reinforced the narrative that she'd become a polarizing figure at the precise moment Disney needed a unifying presence. Once the film's disastrous numbers solidified, industry insiders began speculating about Rachel Zegler's next moves. In show business, a single flop doesn't always ruin a career, especially if the individual has genuine talent. However, the negative publicity swirling around her name made some studios wary. The problem wasn't just the box office failure. It was the sense that she'd gone out of her way to insult the original property's longtime fans and to alienate anyone who didn't share her political perspective. Some argued that she'd land on her feet in more niche or indie roles, where her activism might be admired. Others believed she'd undergo a public relations makeover, shifting toward humbler interviews, downplaying political hot takes, and focusing on her performance skills. With the right guidance, she could still bounce back. After all, Hollywood has a history of forgiving those who demonstrate genuine talent and a willingness to evolve. Disney, on the other hand, learned a brutal lesson about leveraging beloved classics as vehicles for modern commentary. While the corporation remains a giant in global entertainment, Snow White's flop rattled executives, prompting new questions about the viability of more live-action reboots. Had the studio tarnished its golden goose by pushing too hard for an edgy retelling? Could a beloved story that thrives on simplicity endure radical overhauls without alienating its core audience? In the weeks following the film's release, whispers circulated that Disney might refocus on whimsical storytelling, shelving certain reboots or at least softening their progressive angles. Other studios took note too. Tone matters, and sometimes fans want comfort food rather than an impassioned lecture. If there was a silver lining, it was the awareness that clumsy attempts at updating a classic can backfire spectacularly, both financially and culturally. When you add it all up, Rachel Zegler's brash public statements, the film's lavish budget, the abrupt rewrites, and the polarized reception, it's tempting to wonder if Snow White was doomed before it ever reached theaters. Perhaps the bigger question is whether the meltdown would have been avoidable with a different approach, a more measured marketing strategy, or an actress who didn't come off as dismissive of the source material. What's undeniable is that the fiasco revealed deep fault lines in how Hollywood interprets classic tales. Audiences who grew up singing, "Someday My Prince Will Come," and delighting in fairy tale innocence felt mocked. Younger viewers who wanted a feminist reinterpretation found themselves saddled with a half-baked message overshadowed by controversy. Add in a star's political commentary that ignited a broader culture war, and the result was a box office bomb with the potential to reshape corporate thinking at Disney and beyond. Could Snow White have succeeded if it simply balanced a spirited heroine with the timeless sweetness of the original? Or was the public backlash inevitable in a market tired of heavy-handed moralizing? Ultimately, it may stand as a cautionary tale about pushing boundaries without respecting the audience's emotional attachment to beloved stories. If there's a single takeaway for future remakes, it might be that nostalgia and respect for classic magic still matter, no matter how big the budget or how confident the cast. For Rachel Zegler, the path forward remains uncertain. She could either refine her approach to fame and activism or go down in industry lore as the actress who spearheaded one of Disney's most infamous misfires. As Hollywood continues to evolve, one thing is clear: when a fairy tale becomes a flashpoint for cultural strife, the real tragedy isn't a box office flop. It's the loss of the simple, enchanting joy audiences once associated with these stories. Whether you see it as a necessary wake-up call or another example of audiences turning on too much, too fast, the modern Snow White now lives as a stark reminder. Not all classics want a radical rewrite, and sometimes, the safest bet is to preserve the heart of what made them magical in the first place.